And you can't win an infinite series of different wars with the same military doctrine. The Velcran Empire was running out of time, ships, and options. High Counselor Veshitar was 300 years old. He had served the Velcran Empire for 2 centuries. He had witnessed the conquest of 47 species. He had seen every possible form of warfare, or so he thought. Now he stood in the War Council chamber looking at screens that showed nothing but defeats. Red markers indicated lost systems. 15 systems, all in Velcran territory, now controlled by humans, each one taken using tactics that the Velcran had never seen before. "Show me the battle at Zareth Prime again," he ordered. The holographic display activated. The battle had happened 3 weeks ago. 200 Velcran ships defending a major colony. 80 human ships attacking. The numbers favored the Velcran heavily. The humans won in 4 hours. Veshitar watched as the human fleet used tactics that made no logical sense according to Velcran military doctrine. They split into groups of 2 or 3 ships. They used commercial freighters as mobile weapons platforms. They hacked Velcran communication systems and sent false orders that caused friendly fire incidents. They even surrendered 3 ships which the Velcran captured, only to discover they were bombs on timers. "They don't fight like a military," Fleet Admiral Kreshvan said quietly. "They fight like, I don't know what. Chaos organized into purpose." Veshtar paused the replay. He had been studying human tactics for 2 years now. He had watched every battle recording a dozen times, and he had finally begun to understand something that terrified him. "They're not fighting randomly," he said. "There is a pattern, but it's not a tactical pattern. It's a meta pattern." The other council members looked at him in confusion. "Explain," demanded Counselor Rethkor. Veshtar pulled up multiple battle recordings side by side. Ganymede, Titan, Zareth Prime, 20 other engagements. "Watch. At Ganymede, they used scattered formations and new weapons. At Titan, they used drones and gravity wells. At Zareth, they used psychological warfare and deception. Every single battle is completely different." "We know this," Rethkor said impatiently. "They keep changing tactics. That's what makes them so difficult to fight." "No," Veshitar said. "You're not understanding. They don't just change tactics. They never repeat themselves, not once. Not a single formation, weapon combination, or strategic approach has been used twice. In 2 years of warfare, across 50 major battles, they have fought 50 entirely different wars." The room fell silent. The implications slowly settled over the council members like a cold weight. "That's impossible," Kreshvan said. "No species can innovate that fast. The logistics alone, the training, the coordination, the development of new weapons. And yet they do it," Veshitar said, "because that's not an aberration for them. It's normal. It's how they survive." He pulled up another display, this one showing human history. "Look at their species development. In 5,000 years, they went from primitive agriculture to space travel. They survived ice ages by adapting. They survived plagues by changing their societies. They survived world wars by inventing new weapons faster than their enemies could respond. Their entire evolutionary and cultural history is one of constant, rapid adaptation." He turned to face the council. "We made a fundamental error. We assumed humans were like every other species we've encountered. We assumed they would fight using standard military doctrine. We assumed they would do what worked and keep doing it until it failed. But they don't," Kreshvan said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "They change what works. They abandon successful tactics just to avoid being predictable." "Exactly," Veshitar said. "To them, repetition equals death. Predictability is the greatest weakness. So they've built an entire military culture around never doing the same thing twice. And we're fighting them with a doctrine that's been refined over centuries to be as efficient and repeatable as possible." Counselor Rethkor stood up angrily. "Then we adapt faster. We innovate too." Veshtar looked at him with something like pity. "We've been trying. For 2 years. We've modified our shield 17 times. We've developed new weapon systems. We've completely restructured our fleet organization 3 times. And every time, the humans are already ahead of us. By the time we deploy a counter to their tactics, they've moved on to something new." He pulled up a graph showing Velcran adaptation cycles versus human innovation cycles. The difference was stark. Velcran changes came in 6 to 9 month intervals. Human changes came every few weeks. "We can't win a race we're not built to run," Veshitar said quietly. "Our empire is built on stability, tradition, and proven methods. Their entire species is built on chaos, change, and experimentation. We're trying to beat them at their own game, and we're losing. The council chamber was silent except for the quiet hum of computer systems. On screens around the room, tactical data continued to update. Another human victory at the beta sector. Another Velcran fleet forced to retreat. What are our casualty figures? Vester asked. A logistics officer pulled up the data. Total fleet strength is down 32% from the start of the war. We've lost 100,000 soldiers. 15 systems are under human occupation. Production capacity is down 18% due to lost industrial worlds. And human casualties? Best estimates put their military losses at 15%. They've reclaimed all their territory and gained 15 of ours. Their production capacity is increasing. Veshtar nodded slowly. He had suspected as much. And morale? The logistics officer hesitated. Fleet morale is at critical levels. Captains are requesting transfers. Some are refusing to engage human forces. There have been 3 cases of ships surrendering without fighting. That was the final piece. The Velcran Empire was not just losing ships and territory. They were losing the will to fight. Because every captain knew that the next battle would be different from the last. That all their training and experience meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight the same way twice. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Taeyang Kim sat in a human intelligence facility, reviewing data that made him smile. Velcran communications were becoming easier to intercept, not because human technology had improved, but because Velcran security was degrading. Mistakes were being made. Protocols were being violated. It was the behavior of a military under extreme stress. They're breaking, he told Dr. Sorahan during their daily meeting. Sora pulled up her own analysis. Commander Hayen's cyber warfare teams have penetrated deep into Velcran networks. We have access to fleet movements, production schedules, even War Council communications. Should we tell Admiral Wu Jin? Taeyang asked. He already knows, a voice said from the doorway. Admiral Wu Jin Lee walked into the lab, followed by Captain Minho Song, who commanded the human stealth fleet. We've been monitoring Velcran internal communications for 3 months, Wu Jin said. They're discussing peace terms. The War Council is divided. Some want to keep fighting. Others see the writing on the wall. How long until they break? Sora asked. Captain Song's stealth ships are already positioned throughout Velcran space, Wu Jin said. We could strike their homeworld tomorrow if we wanted. They know it, we know it. The question is whether they'll admit defeat before we force the issue. Minho Song pulled up a holographic map. Red markers showed stealth ship positions. They surrounded every major Velcran system, including their capital. We're ghosts in their territory, Minho said. They can't find us. Can't fight us. Can't predict where we'll strike next. It's psychological warfare at its finest. Wu Jin looked at the map with satisfaction. 2 years ago, we were the ones on the defensive. We were the ones watching our colonies burn. Now they're afraid to leave their own territory because they don't know what we'll do next. Because we don't even know what we'll do next, Sora said with a slight smile. We'll figure it out when the moment comes. That's exactly right, Wu Jin said. And that's why we're winning. They need to plan everything months in advance. We can adapt in real time. A communication alert sounded. The secure channel from Earth Command. Wu Jin activated it. Admiral, we've received a communication from the Velcran Empire. They're requesting a ceasefire and peace negotiations. Wu Jin looked at his team. Sora, who had analyzed every weakness. Taeyang, who had turned data into victory. Minho, who had taken the war to the enemy's heart. They had all lost friends at New Jeju. They had all spent 2 years living and breathing warfare. Tell them we'll agree to negotiations, Wu Jin said, but on our terms. Neutral territory, full transparency, and they negotiate with me personally. The communication officer acknowledged and closed the channel. Beshitar would receive the message in an hour. He would agree to every condition. He had no choice. The Velcran Empire had finally learned what 47 other species had failed to understand before they were conquered. When you fight humans, you're not fighting a static opponent. You're fighting an opponent that evolves faster than you can react. Every battle teaches them. Every victory makes them more dangerous. And they never ever repeat themselves. The Velcran had entered human space expecting an easy conquest. Instead, they found themselves in a war of evolution. And they had lost that war before the first shot was fired because they didn't understand the fundamental truth about humanity. The Velcran War Council met in their capital world, 300 light-years from human space. The council chamber was ancient, built from black stone that had witnessed centuries of military victories. Today, it witnessed something new. Fear. "We lost 150 ships," High Counselor Veshtar said. His scaled face showed no emotion, but his voice carried an edge. The humans used weapons we had never seen, tactics we had never encountered. How is this possible? The military commanders looked at each other. No one wanted to speak first. Finally, Fleet Admiral Kreshevan stepped forward. "We have analyzed the battle data from Ganymede. The humans did not fight defensively as they did at New Jeju. They scattered their fleet, used independent action, employed new weapons specifically designed to counter our shields. Then we counter their counters," Veshtar said. "Modify our shield frequencies, develop new point defense against their swarm missiles, implement decentralized command protocols so our fleets can function without a flagship. It will take 9 months to refit the fleet," Kreshevan said. "Then we have 9 months. Use them wisely. The humans got lucky once. They won't get lucky again." But luck had nothing to do with it. On Earth, Dr. Sora Han was already 3 steps ahead. She sat in her lab with Lieutenant Taeyang Kim and a new face. Commander Hyun Park was a cyber warfare specialist, recruited from military intelligence. She had ideas that made even Sora nervous. "They'll adapt to what we did at Ganymede," Sora said. "They'll change their shield frequencies, improve their point defenses, decentralize their command structure." "So we can't use the same tactics again," Taeyang said. "We need something new." "Not just new," Hyun said quietly. "We need to anticipate their adaptations and counter them before they even deploy them." She pulled up a holographic display. "I've been studying Velcran military history. Every time they encounter a new threat, they respond in predictable ways. They modify their technology but keep the same overall doctrine. They're organizationally incapable of true innovation. They only adapt." "And there's a difference?" Taeyang asked. "Adaptation is reactive. Innovation is creative," Sora explained. "They respond to what we do. We invent what they haven't imagined yet." Hyun smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "I've been working on something. Autonomous hunter-killer drones. They don't use conventional targeting. They track heat signatures, magnetic fields. Even the gravitational wake that large ships leave in space. You can't jam them. You can't hide from them. And they're small, enough that point defenses will struggle to target them all," Taeyang added, seeing the implications. "Exactly. But that's not all." Hyun pulled up another design. "Ghost ships. AI-controlled vessels that look exactly like our frigates on sensors. They broadcast the same signals, move the same way. But they're actually just reactors and explosives." Sora stared at the design. "We make them think they're fighting our fleet, but they're really shooting decoys. While our real ships hit them from unexpected angles," Taeyang finished. The 3 of them looked at each other. This was beyond anything any military had ever attempted. It was psychological warfare meets technological innovation meets pure tactical creativity. "Admiral Wujin needs to see this," Sora said. 9 months later, the Velcran third wave entered the Titan system. 300 ships, newly refitted and ready. Their shields operated on different frequencies. Their point defenses had been upgraded. Their fleet now operated with multiple command nodes instead of a single flagship. Fleet Admiral Kreshevan himself led the fleet. He had studied the Ganymede disaster extensively. He was ready for human tricks this time. "Sensors show human fleet ahead," his tactical officer reported. 150 ships. They're in a loose formation similar to Ganymede. Kreshevan nodded. "Maintain spacing. All command nodes. Stay synchronized. When they scatter, we stay organized. Our improved point defenses will handle their swarm missiles. Our new shield frequencies will protect against their plasma weapons." The Velcran fleet advanced confidently. They were ready for everything the humans had shown before. They weren't ready for what came next. The human fleet scattered again, but this time something was different. Hundreds of small drones swarmed from every human ship. They were tiny, fast, and there were thousands of them. "Deploy point defenses," Kreshevan ordered. The Velcran ships fired, destroying dozens of drones. But there were too many. And these drones didn't attack shields. They went for engines, sensor arrays, weapon ports, weak spots. They attached themselves to hulls and exploded. Small explosions, but thousands of them. Velcran ships began losing capabilities. Engines failed, sensors went dark, weapons stopped functioning. The ships weren't destroyed, but they were crippled. "What are these things?" Kreshvan demanded. His tactical display showed chaos as drones overwhelmed his fleet's defenses. Then the real attack began. Human ships appeared, but their formations were different from Ganymede. They worked in coordinated pairs now, but the coordination was flexible, dynamic. One ship would draw fire while its partner struck from an unexpected angle. Then they'd switch roles. There was a pattern, but it changed constantly, and the weapons were different too. Gravity well generators created distortions in space that disrupted Velcran formations. Ships found themselves pulled off course, colliding with each other. The tight spacing that Kreshvan had maintained became a liability as ships crashed together. Commander Unichoi led a squadron of 6 destroyers in a new formation they had practiced for months. It was called the flowing water pattern. The ships moved like a stream, always adapting to resistance, never fighting directly against strength. "Target that battleship cluster," Una ordered. "Execute pattern flowing 7. Her squadron split into 3 pairs. They approached the Velcran battleships from different vectors, forcing the enemy to divide their fire. When the Velcran focused on one pair, the other 2 struck. When they switched targets, the first pair hit them. It was like fighting smoke. The Velcran tried to adapt in real time, but their command structure, even with multiple nodes, couldn't keep up with the speed of human tactical changes. Then the ghost ships arrived. 50 vessels appeared on Velcran sensors, looking exactly like human frigates. They broadcast proper identification codes, moved in formation. The Velcran targeted them, pouring fire into what they thought were valuable targets. The ships exploded spectacularly, but they were just bombs disguised as ships. And while the Velcran wasted ammunition on decoys, real human vessels struck from completely different directions. Kreshvan realized they were losing. Again. Despite all the adaptations, despite all the improvements. The humans weren't fighting like they had at Ganymede. They had evolved. Again. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, emergency jump." The Velcran fleet scattered, jumping to hyperspace in disorder. They left behind 70 destroyed ships and another 50 crippled wrecks. Human casualties were minimal. 18 ships lost. It wasn't even close to a fair fight. But Admiral Wujin didn't celebrate. He stood on his bridge and knew the truth. The Velcran would try again. They would study this defeat too. They would develop new counters, but so would humanity. Already, Sora and her team were working on the next innovation. Hyunwoo Nam was designing weapons that existed only in theory. Human captains were training in tactics that hadn't been invented yet. The war became a race. Every 6 months, the Velcran attacked with new adaptations. Every time, humans had already moved beyond what the Velcran were prepared for. Battles happened across dozens of systems. Each one was different. Each one taught both sides new lessons. But there was a crucial difference. The Velcran learned slowly. They adapted their existing doctrine. They improved what they had. It was incremental, safe, predictable. Humans learned fast. They threw away everything after each battle and started fresh. They innovated recklessly. They took risks. They invented entirely new ways to fight. 2 years into the war, humanity was winning. Not through superior numbers or technology, but through superior evolution. The Velcran Empire, for the first time in its history, was being pushed back. Captain Una Choi, now promoted to Commodore, led a strike force into Velcran territory. They captured an entire system without firing a shot, using electronic warfare to convince the Velcran garrison that a massive fleet was approaching when it was really just 30 ships and a lot of creative signal manipulation. Dr. Sora Han published tactical manuals that were obsolete within months because humans kept inventing better tactics. She didn't mind. That was the point. Commander Haeon Park developed AI systems so sophisticated that Velcran computers couldn't defend against them. Human cyber attacks became as devastating as physical weapons. And through it all, the Velcran kept trying to adapt using their old methods. They couldn't understand that the problem wasn't their tactics. The problem was their entire approach to war. They fought to win battles using proven methods. Humans fought to evolve faster than the enemy could adapt. It was a race the Velcran could never win, because by the time they adapted to what humans did yesterday, humans were already doing something completely different today. The Velcran War Council was about to learn a hard truth. When you fight a species that refuses to repeat itself, every day is a new war. Commander Threscal stood on the bridge of his flagship and felt satisfied. 400 Velcran warships surrounded him in perfect formation, the largest fleet ever assembled. The humans couldn't possibly stand against such power. Long-range sensors show human fleet ahead, his tactical officer reported. 200 ships. Standard defensive formation around Ganymede Station. Threscal examined the tactical display. The human ships looked the same as before. Same classes, same designs. They were arrayed in a defensive sphere around the station just like at New Jeju. Predictable. Weak. They learned nothing, he said to his officers. They'll fight the same way and die the same way. Maintain formation. Prepare standard encirclement pattern Theta 9. The Velcran fleet advanced. Their formation was flawless. Ships moved in perfect coordination, a tactic refined over centuries of conquest. This pattern had broken 47 species. It would break the humans, too. On the human side, Admiral Wu Jin Li watched the Velcran approach. His fleet was spread across the system, appearing to defend the station. It looked exactly like the defense at New Jeju. That was the point. They're taking the bait, Wu Jin said quietly. All ships stand by for planned scatter. Execute on my mark. The Velcran fleet reached weapons range. Threscal gave the order to fire. Purple beams lanced across space, targeting the human defensive sphere. But the sphere exploded. Not from Velcran fire, but by design. 200 human ships suddenly scattered in 200 different directions. There was no formation, no defensive line. Just chaos. What are they doing? Threscal demanded. His tactical display was suddenly filled with human ships moving in unpredictable patterns. Some dove beneath the Velcran formation. Others climbed above it. Dozens more shot straight toward the Velcran fleet at maximum acceleration. They've abandoned defensive posture, his tactical officer said, confusion in his voice. I can't track their movements. There's no pattern. That was exactly right. There was no pattern, because each human ship was fighting independently, following its own plan. Commander Yuna Choi's destroyer Sol was one of the ships diving beneath the Velcran formation. Her crew had trained for this moment for 6 months. No defensive positions, no predictable tactics, just speed and surprise. Weapons, prepare plasma cannon salvo, target that cruiser on the port side. Helm attack run Alpha 7. The Sol accelerated to full thrust. It wove between 2 Velcran destroyers before they could react. The new plasma cannons charged up. They were tuned to the exact frequency that Dr. Sorahan had identified. The frequency that Velcran shields were weakest against. Fire. Blue-white plasma bolts streaked across space. They hit the Velcran cruiser's shields and didn't bounce off like before. Instead, they burned through. The shields collapsed entirely. Follow-up shots tore into the cruiser's hull, ripping through armor and causing massive explosions. The cruiser broke apart. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated dozens of times. Human ships appeared from unexpected angles, fired new weapons that the Velcran had never seen, and vanished before return fire could track them. The Velcran formation, designed for predictable enemies, couldn't handle the chaos. All ships deploy swarm missiles, Wu Jin ordered. From every human ship, hundreds of small missiles launched. They weren't like the nuclear torpedoes from New Jeju. These were intelligent, networked, and there were thousands of them. The Velcran point defense systems tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. The missiles swarmed like angry insects, overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. Velcran ships started dying. Threscal watched in growing horror as his tactical display filled with red marks. Each mark was a destroyed ship. 10, 20, 40. The number kept climbing. Reform the fleet, he shouted. Execute counter pattern Delta 7. His fleet tried to respond, but the humans weren't following any pattern to counter. They were everywhere and nowhere, fighting in ways that made no tactical sense according to Velcran doctrine. Lieutenant Nari Jung sat aboard the electronic warfare ship Guangzhou, surrounded by screens and signal processors. Her job was to blind the Velcran fleet. She activated the new jamming systems that Hyunwoo Nam's team had designed. Invisible electronic signals swept across the battlefield. Velcran sensors suddenly filled with ghost images. Their targeting computers couldn't lock on. Their communications became garbled. The famous Velcran fleet coordination fell apart as ships couldn't talk to each other properly. Jamming effective, Nari reported to Woojin. Their fleet coordination is compromised. Good. Phase 2. All stealth ships, you're clear to engage. In the shadow of Ganymede's moon, 6 human ships had been waiting. They were painted black and coated in sensor-absorbing material. They had been sitting silent for 3 days waiting for this moment. Commander Yuna Choi received the signal. She was no longer on the Sol. For this mission, she commanded a stealth destroyer called the Shadow. Its entire design focused on one thing: getting close to important targets without being detected. Helm, bring us around. Navigation, plot intercept course for the Velcran flagship. She had studied Velcran fleet doctrine for 6 months. She knew exactly where the command ship would be. Center of the formation. Always. It was Velcran tradition. Predictable. The Shadow moved like a ghost through the chaotic battle. Velcran sensors, already jammed and confused, didn't detect the small ship sliding through the darkness. Yuna's crew was silent. Everyone knew what was at stake. Range to target 2,000 kilometers, the tactical officer whispered. Load all kinetic penetrators. Target the flagship's bridge section. Dr. Han's analysis showed it's always in the same location on their command ships. The Shadow closed to 1,000 kilometers. 500. 200. Yuna could see the massive Velcran flagship on her view screen now. It was 3 times the size of any human ship. But size didn't matter if you couldn't see the knife coming. Fire. 20 kinetic penetrators launched at near light speed. They were just dense rods of metal, but at that velocity they hit like nuclear weapons. The Velcran flagship's shields were focused outward, toward the main battle. The penetrators came from behind, from the darkness, from an angle no one was watching. They punched through the aft shields and kept going. Metal tore through metal. The flagship's bridge section exploded in a brilliant flash. Commander Threskal died instantly. He never knew what hit him. One moment he was trying to coordinate his fleet. The next he simply ceased to exist. The Shadow was already gone, disappearing back into the darkness before the Velcran even realized what had happened. Without Threskal, the Velcran fleet lost all coordination. Individual captains tried to fight, but they had no experience with independent action. Their entire military culture was built on central command and standardized tactics. When those failed, they didn't know what to do. Human ships pressed the attack. They came from every angle using different tactics, never repeating the same approach. Some ships worked in pairs. Others fought alone. Some used long-range missiles. Others closed to knife-fighting range. There was no pattern. No way to predict what would happen next. The battle lasted 12 hours. When it ended, 150 Velcran ships were destroyed. Another 100 were damaged and limping away. Only 50 escaped relatively intact. The human fleet lost 32 ships. It was still a hard price, but nothing like New Jeju. This time, humanity had won. Woojin stood on his bridge and watched the Velcran retreat. His officers were celebrating, but he remained quiet. This was just one battle. The war wasn't over, but they had proven something important. The Velcran could be beaten. Their centuries of military dominance meant nothing against an enemy that refused to fight the same way twice. Across human space, news of the victory spread. Morale soared. Production increased. The message was clear. Humanity could adapt faster than the Velcran could react. In the wreckage of the battle, human recovery teams salvaged Velcran technology. More data, more information, more ways to innovate. Dr. Sorahan received the battle reports and immediately started analyzing them. What had worked? What hadn't? How would the Velcran respond? She was already thinking 3 battles ahead, because she knew the truth. The Velcran would adapt. They would study this defeat and develop counters. They would come back stronger, but humans would be ready. They would have changed again, evolved again. The race had begun and humanity intended to win. The warning came at 0400 hours. 300 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the new Jeju system. The colony's sensors screamed alerts across every military channel. Within minutes, Admiral Jiho Park was on the bridge of his flagship, the Incheon, staring at a display that showed his worst nightmare. Jiho had served in the Earth Defense Force for 23 years. He had fought pirates, stopped smugglers, and kept the peace across a dozen colonies. But he had never seen anything like this. The alien fleet was massive. Their ships were twice the size of human vessels, covered in dark armor that absorbed sensor scans. They moved in perfect formation like a school of predatory fish. "Get me tactical," Jiho ordered. His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the armrest of his command chair. A young officer turned from her console. "Sir, we're counting 300 contacts. Ship classes unknown. They're not responding to any communication attempts." Jiho looked at the tactical display. His fleet numbered 96 ships. They were spread across the system, protecting mining stations and civilian transports. Against 300 unknown hostiles, the math was simple and brutal. Sound general quarters. Recall all ships to defensive position Alpha 7. Get those civilian transports moving toward the jump point, now. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos. Officers shouted orders. Screens flickered with incoming data. Somewhere in the colony below, 300,000 people were waking up to their last normal day. The alien fleet advanced. They didn't send messages or demands. They just came forward like a slow tide. When they reached weapons range, they opened fire without warning. The first salvo hit the mining station Dihan 3. The station's shields flared bright blue and then collapsed. Bright lances of energy tore through metal and flesh. 1,200 workers died in the first 30 seconds of the war. "All ships engage," Jiho commanded. His fleet surged forward. The battle was chaos. Human ships fired nuclear torpedoes and railgun slugs. Some hit, tearing chunks from alien hulls. But the aliens had shields that regenerated faster than humans could damage them. Their weapons were more powerful too. Beams of purple energy cut through human armor like scissors through paper. Captain Yuna Choi commanded the frigate Busan, part of Jiho's screen force. She watched 2 destroyers explode on her view screen, their hulls torn apart by concentrated alien fire. Her tactical officer was shouting damage reports, but Yuna forced herself to focus. "Helm, evasive pattern Delta. Weapons, target that cruiser's port side. Full spread." Her ship twisted and dove. Missiles streaked toward the alien cruiser. Most were destroyed by point defense, but 3 got through. They detonated against the shields in bright flowers of nuclear fire. The shields flickered but held. "Their shields are too strong," her weapons officer said. "We can't penetrate them." Yuna watched the tactical display. The human fleet was losing. Ships were dying faster than they could retreat. But she noticed something. When the alien shields took hits, they dimmed for exactly 3 seconds before recharging. It was a pattern. "A weakness, record everything," she ordered. "I want full sensor data on those shields. Frequency, regeneration rate, power signatures, everything." The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, 60 ships of Jiho's fleet were destroyed or crippled. The aliens lost only 14 vessels. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Jiho gave the order he had dreaded. "All ships retreat. Execute evacuation protocol." Yuna's frigate was one of the last to leave. She loaded her ship with refugees from the planet below. Families clutched children. Old people wept. Everyone knew they would never see their homes again. As the Busan accelerated toward the jump point, Yuna watched New Jeju shrink on her view screen. Alien ships were entering orbit. She could see the flashes of orbital bombardment beginning. The colony's shields wouldn't last a day. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the alien fleet," her communications officer said. "Put it on screen." The image that appeared made Yuna's blood run cold. It was an alien, roughly humanoid but covered in gray scales. Its eyes were black and emotionless. It spoke in a harsh, clicking language that the computer translated. "I am Commander Thresikal of the Velkran Empire. Your species is weak. Your resistance is meaningless. We have conquered 47 civilizations. You will be the 48th. Surrender now and serve or die." The transmission ended. Yuna's hands shook with rage, but she forced herself to think clearly. She turned to her tactical officer. "Did you get those shield readings?" "Yes, ma'am. Complete data on shield frequencies, weapon signatures, and fleet formations." "Good. Transmit everything to Earth Command. Maximum encryption. Make sure they get every byte of data we collected." The officer's fingers flew across his console. Transmission sent. Earth Command confirms receipt. Yuna nodded slowly. She looked back at the view screen one last time. New Jeju was burning. 40,000 people were already dead. But humanity had learned something today. They had learned how the Velcrin fought, how their ships moved, how their shields worked. The Busan jumped to hyperspace carrying its cargo of refugees and precious tactical data. Behind them, the Velcran fleet established orbital control. They landed occupation forces. They enslaved the survivors. They celebrated their easy victory. On the bridge of his command ship, Threskull reviewed the battle reports. The humans had fought with primitive weapons and predictable tactics. They had done exactly what every other young species did when faced with Velcron power. They had panicked, fought in desperate defensive formations, and died. The next system will fall even faster, Threskull told his officers. Prepare the second wave. We will reach their homeworld within 6 months. This war is already won, his officers agreed. The Velcron Empire had never lost a war. They used the same proven tactics that had crushed dozens of species. Why would humans be any different? But they didn't know what was happening on Earth. They didn't know that every second of combat footage was being analyzed by thousands of human minds. They didn't know that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their weapons or their ships. It was their ability to learn. And humans were very fast learners. The war had just begun, and the Velcrin Empire had made their first and fatal mistake. They assumed humans would fight the same way twice. They would soon learn how wrong they were. Dr. Sorahan hadn't slept in 3 days. The coffee mug on her desk had been cold for hours, but she didn't notice. Her eyes were locked on the holographic display floating above her workstation. The same 10-second clip played over and over. A Velcran cruiser firing its main weapon, the purple beam lancing out. A human destroyer exploding. Run it again, she said to the computer. Slow it down by half. The image crawled forward frame by frame. Sora leaned closer. There. Just before the beam fired, there was a power surge in the cruiser's shield grid. The shields dimmed for exactly 2.8 seconds. It happened every single time. She saved the finding to her growing database. After 3 days of analysis, she had identified 17 distinct patterns in Velcran combat behavior. 17 weaknesses that could be exploited. Maybe. The door to her lab opened. Lieutenant Taeyang Kim walked in, carrying 2 fresh cups of coffee. He looked as tired as she felt. He had been on the Incheon during the battle at New Jeju. He had watched his friends die. You found something, he said. It wasn't a question. He could read her expressions after weeks of working together. Their shields have a regeneration cycle, Sora explained. Watch this. She pulled up a compilation of clips. Every time a Velcran ship's shields were hit, they flickered and then recharged. The pattern was identical across their entire fleet. Taeyang studied the display. His tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. If we can time our volleys to hit during that regeneration window, we might be able to punch through, Sora finished. But there's more. Look at their fleet formations. She pulled up a different display. This one showed the movement patterns of the Velcran fleet during the battle. Taeyang watched for a minute, then frowned. They're following a textbook encirclement pattern, like something from a military academy course. Exactly, Sora said. They're rigid, predictable. They did the same formation at New Jeju that they did when they attacked the Anthari species 5 years ago. I checked the records we captured from their transmissions. Taeyang sat down heavily. They use the same tactics every time because those tactics always work. Every species they fight responds the same way. Defensive formations, concentrated firepower, retreat when overwhelmed. Which is exactly what we did, Sora said quietly. They sat in silence for a moment. On screens around the lab, data scrolled past. Sensor readings, weapon signatures, shield frequencies. Every piece of information that Captain Yuna Choi and dozens of other survivors had managed to transmit before retreat. We need to show this to command, Taeyang said finally. The meeting took place in a deep bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Earth Command had moved all critical operations underground after New Jeju fell. In the main briefing room, every senior officer in the human military watched as Sora presented her findings. Admiral Wu Jin Lee sat at the head of the table. He was 58 years old with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death. He had been promoted to Supreme Commander 3 days ago, after his predecessor died in a Velcran raid on the Mars shipyards. Show us what you've got, "Doctor," he said. Sora activated the holographic projector. The room filled with images of Velcran's ship's tactical data and combat analysis. She spoke for 30 minutes straight, laying out every pattern she had found, every weakness, every predictability. When she finished, the room was silent. "You're saying they fight the same way every time," Wu Jin said slowly. "They don't adapt. They don't change tactics." "Not in any significant way," Sora confirmed. "They make small adjustments, but their core doctrine remains the same. It's served them well. They've conquered 47 species using these exact tactics. Because every species they fought did the same thing we did," Taiyang added. "Defend and retreat. Standard military doctrine." Wu Jin leaned back in his chair. His fingers drummed on the table. "Then we don't use standard doctrine. We do something they've never seen before." He looked around the table. "We have 6 months before they reach the core systems. Maybe less. In that time, we need to rebuild our fleet. But not with the same ships. Not with the same tactics. We need to become something new." The room erupted in discussion. Some officers argued it was too risky. Others said there wasn't enough time. But Wu Jin raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Han, Lieutenant Kim, you're both assigned to strategic planning. Your job is to design tactics that the Velcran have never encountered. Use every bit of data we have. Think outside every box." He turned to another officer. "General Nam, you're in charge of weapons development. I want new systems, new approaches, things that can exploit the weaknesses Dr. Han identified." Chief Engineer Hyunwoo Nam nodded. He was already thinking about the possibilities. Plasma weapons tuned to Velcran shield frequencies, swarm missiles that could overwhelm point defenses, electronic warfare systems to blind their sensors. "We'll need to retrain the entire fleet," another admiral said. "New tactics mean new training." "Then we start today," Wu Jin said. "From now on, every simulation runs different scenarios. Every war game uses different strategies. I don't want any captain fighting the same battle twice, not even in practice." He stood up and everyone in the room stood with him. "The Velcran think they know us. They think we're just another species that will fight and die the same way as the 47 before us. They think they've already won this war." His voice hardened. "Let's prove them wrong." The meeting ended. Officers scattered to their new assignments. Sora and Taiyang returned to their lab, but now they had a team of 50 analysts working with them. Hyunwoo Nam took over 3 entire factories and started producing new weapon prototypes. Across human space, the military machine shifted into high gear. Shipyards worked around the clock. Crews trained in radical new tactics. Scientists developed weapons that had been considered too experimental just weeks ago. And every day reports came in of new Velcran attacks. 2 more colonies fell. Outposts were destroyed. Thousands more humans died. But each attack provided more data, more patterns, more information to feed into the growing database of Velcran weaknesses. Captain Yuna Choi was promoted to commander and given a new ship. The destroyer Sol was fresh from the shipyards, equipped with weapons that didn't exist a month ago. She spent her days training her crew in the new tactics. Unpredictable movements, adaptive formations, never the same approach twice. In her quarters at night, she studied the tactical manuals that Sora and Taiyang were writing. They read like nothing she had learned in the academy. Forget everything you know about naval warfare. Fight like you've never fought before. Surprise is your greatest weapon. Yuna memorized every page. When she closed her eyes, she saw New Jeju burning. She saw her friends dying. That memory fueled her through the exhausting training days. The Velcran had beaten humanity once. It wouldn't happen again. 6 months passed quickly. The Velcran's second wave was detected entering the Ganymede system. 400 ships this time, the largest fleet the Velcran Empire had ever assembled. Commander Threskull himself was leading them. He expected another easy victory, another predictable defense, another massacre. He was about to learn a hard lesson. Humans don't repeat themselves.